In 1883, Major Thomas Hayes would purchase the land where Waverly Hills Sanatorium stands today. He did not purchase it with the intention of it becoming a sanatorium. If we fast forward to the 1900s, there was a tuberculosis outbreak, and this would turn into a tuberculosis sanatorium. Ever since then, it's had different owners that wanted it to serve a different purpose, but today, it's a tourist attraction that you can actually visit and stay in overnight. However, what happened there? How many people died, and why has it been dubbed one of the most haunted places in the eastern United States? Let's dive right into Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, as you can see by the title and the intro, we're going to be talking about Waverly Hills Sanatorium. So of course, just as a disclaimer, this video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Some of my opinions will be sprinkled in, along with all of my resources will be linked in the description box below. I do encourage everyone to go ahead and do their own research as well. If you've been around for a few years here on my channel, and if you've been watching more of my Spooktober spooky videos, or even just like the true crime videos that I have on my channel, you might remember a video that I did on Greystone, which is a psychiatric hospital in New Jersey that I may or may not have visited myself. Greystone was actually demolished in 2015. When I was thinking of topics to cover for my Spooktober series, I remembered my video about Greystone and somehow came across Waverly Hills Sanatorium. While Waverly Hills was not a psychiatric hospital, they were a tuberculosis sanatorium. I was still interested in learning more about it, especially after finding out that people have claimed that there are hauntings there. It has turned into a tourist attraction now. So I was interested in finding out more about Waverly Hills, its history, things like that. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Located in Louisville, Kentucky, Waverly Hills was not built as a sanatorium. The land that the sanatorium stands on was purchased by Major Thomas H. Hayes in 1883. He bought this to be his family's home. Because the Hayes home was far away from schools, he decided to open a school for his daughters. It started off as a one-room schoolhouse, and he hired Lizzie Lee Harris as a teacher. Lizzie Lee Harris loved the Waverly novels by Walter Scott, and Thomas decided to name the school Waverly School. Because he loved the name so much, he named the entire property Waverly Hill. It's important to note that Major Hayes spelled Waverly W-A-V-E-R-L-E-Y. When the Board of Tuberculosis ended up buying the land and opened the sanatorium, they changed the spelling to only include the E after the V. However, the two different spellings fluctuated over the years. I couldn't find why the spelling changed, but maybe it was just easier to write it with one less letter, or maybe people would spell it incorrectly all the time. Who knows? In the early 1900s, Jefferson County had an outbreak of tuberculosis, or otherwise referred to as the White Plague. Due to the wetlands of Louisville, cases of tuberculosis were high because the wetlands were a perfect breeding ground for the tuberculosis bacteria. A two-story wooden sanatorium was opened with two open-air pavilions that had a capacity of 20 patients. It was said that fresh air was a type of treatment for tuberculosis, but we'll go over tuberculosis and treatments in a little bit. In early 1911, the city of Louisville was planning to build a new city hospital, and they were given $25,000 to build a hospital specifically for treating tuberculosis. On August 31st, 1912, the tuberculosis patients from City Hospital were relocated to temporary tents on the grounds of Waverly Hills while they waited for a hospital to be completed. Once December of that same year rolled around, their hospital for advanced cases of tuberculosis opened with a capacity of 40 patients. In 1914, they added a children's pavilion, which created space for an extra 50 beds. The children's pavilion wasn't just for children being treated, but for the children of adults being treated. The total capacity at this point was around 130 patients. Because this hospital was made out of wood, it was constantly needing to be repaired. That's when it was decided that they needed a better structure for the hospital and they needed more space because people were actually being turned away. In March of 1924, the construction of a 5-story building that would be able to treat over 400 patients was started. This particular building opened on October 17th, 1926, which at the time of this video being posted, it's exactly 96 years ago. No, I didn't do that on purpose. I actually did have a schedule going on prior to researching for this. But anyway, in 1943, there was a new medicine called streptomycin. I'm not sure if I'm saying that properly, that was meant to treat tuberculosis. Cases did start to lower, and then the remaining patients were sent to Hazelwood Sanatorium. Waverly Hills closed in June of 1961. It would reopen, though, in 1962 as the Woodhaven Geriatric Center, which was a senior living center that was mostly treating patients of different stages of dementia and mobility issues. Unfortunately, Woodhaven failed really badly. They were severely understaffed and overcrowded. There were reports of patient neglect, and it was closed by the state of Kentucky in 1982, which to me isn't too surprising given what I know about Greystone as well. We also hear of patient neglect still to this day. In 1983, J. Clifford Todd bought the hospital for $3 million. He and Milton Thompson, who was an architect, wanted to convert the hospital into a minimum security prison. However, neighbors started protesting about this, which in turn made them decide to stop the plans for a prison. When Todd and Thompson wanted to possibly turn the hospital into apartments, they actually couldn't because they were counting on Jefferson Fiscal Court to buy about 140 acres for approximately $400,000, which would have funded part of their project. If we fast forward to March 1996, Robert Alberhasky bought Waverly Hills and the surrounding area. He wanted to construct the world's largest statue of Jesus, along with opening up an arts and worship center. Robert wanted to construct the statue because he was inspired by the Christ Redeemer statue in Rio de Janeiro. The first part of development would have cost $4 million, and the statue would have been put on the roof of Waverly Hills. The second part of development would have cost $8 million, if not more, to convert the old sanatorium into a chapel, theater, and gift shop. These plans ended up falling through because the donations were not what he expected. In 1 year, only $3,000 was raised, which meant that this whole project was canceled in December 1997. Waverly Hills was bought by Charlie and Tina Mattingly in 2001 for $230,000. They wanted to restore it and turn it into a tourist site. The Waverly Hills Historical Society, which was started by Charlie, has regular historical and ghost tours all year round. There is a current legal battle going on between Charlie and the Waverly Hills Historical Society. There is a GoFundMe that was started by Charlie's daughter, Christina, and that GoFundMe reads, "Hello, I'm Christina Mattingly. I'm setting up this fundraiser to help my dad, Charlie Mattingly's legal defense. He has owned and physically worked very, very hard to make Waverly Hills Sanatorium what it is today for over 20 years. Tons of blood, sweat, and tears. The place looks amazing from all the work he has accomplished. This year, the current board members of the Historical Society fired and banned my mom, my brother, and my dad from his own property, then rehiring spouses and close friends for those positions. My dad is a good man. He has worked his fingers to the bone for everything and everyone's well-being his entire life. He helps everyone he can whenever he can. He is trusting to a fault. He has helped so many people who definitely didn't deserve it, fixing people's broken down cars, lending his own car, putting heat in people's houses, cutting disabled and elderly people's grass, giving loans that he knows could never be paid back. The amount of charity he has given to so many doesn't go unnoticed. I've witnessed so much kindness from this man. Now he is 63, and everything he has worked so hard for is being taken away from him. He put all his time, efforts, and money into preserving the land and upkeep on this beautiful historical building. Then this happens. He is in need of legal defense. What is being done to him is wrong. He has never taken a paid position. He worked day and night, creating jobs for several people who needed jobs. We are in need of funds immediately. Your support means everything. I can't thank you enough for giving us the opportunity to fight back. We are grateful for any and all help we receive. We plan on fighting for what is right and not letting people who never put in any work try to bully my dad and take away what is rightfully his." There is a change.org petition to save Waverly Hills against the, according to what was written on that petition, a hostile takeover by the Waverly Hills Historical Society.
This weekend, protesters say they'll be gathering outside the famed Waverly Hills Sanatorium in southwest Jefferson County. The Waverly Hills Historical Society has removed the longtime owner who turned the sanatorium into a major tourist site for people fascinated with paranormal activity. In a statement on Facebook, the Historical Society clarified that they are not trying to take the building away from the owner. They're currently in a legal dispute over funding. We'll be bringing you both sides of the issue revolving around this Louisville landmark as that story develops.
One article talked about a group called Save Waverly Hills that is currently protesting in defense of Charlie Mattingly. Their belief is that the Waverly Hills Historical Society is trying to take the building away from Charlie. Keith Turner, which was one of the protesters, said, quote, "If we allow that to happen, we're going to lose Waverly Hills the way we see it now. It won't be the same," end quote. One source stated that the Historical Society said they signed a 99-year lease agreement with Charlie 5 years ago due to an IRS investigation into Charlie and the nonprofit not using funds properly. According to the Historical Society, they said, quote, "The owner of Waverly Hills Sanatorium has not been forced out. The Historical Society has a lease with the owner and continues to fulfill our agreement. The Historical Society pays for all expenses and costs associated with the property and has been doing so for nearly 2 decades.
Hello everyone, my name is Renee Clark, President of the Waverly Hills Historical Society. In recent months, there has been a lot of misinformation online regarding the Waverly Hills Sanatorium and its Historical Society. And we'd like to clear the air to address some of these rumors that have been circulating. The Waverly Hills Historical Society was founded by the owner of the building as a nonprofit organization. Along with coordinating all tours, our main job is to preserve and restore this building and its grounds. We entered into this 99-year lease agreement with the owner back in 2017 after the IRS began an investigation into the owner and nonprofit, raising concerns of private inurement to the owner, which threatened the nonprofit's mission to restore and maintain Waverly Hills Sanatorium. The IRS stepped in to enforce the Internal Revenue Code that prohibits the owner from profiting off of Waverly Hills. At that time, assurances were given that there was and would be no private inurement to the owner. To ensure this, there was a change to the structure of the Historical Society's board and processes. The owner and his wife are no longer part of the current board of directors or involved in the restoration, but the ownership of this property has not changed. We are leasing the property as agreed upon with the owner. We have and will continue to be fully transparent with the community about this relationship. For now, let's clear up some of these false rumors against us. The Historical Society is not trying to take the building from its owner. The owner of Waverly Hills Sanatorium has not been forced out. The Historical Society has a lease with the owner and continues to fulfill our agreement. The Historical Society pays for all expenses and costs associated with the property and has been doing so for nearly 2 decades. In 2021, the Historical Society did file suit against the owner to be repaid for damages and expenses incurred as a result of past actions and financial mishandlings by the owner. Damages sought are to reimburse the Historical Society for losses and funds that were allotted for the restoration and preservation of the building. This lawsuit is ongoing. The Historical Society is not overpaying its executive director or staff. This accusation on social media is false. The current executive director's salary remains in line with that of the previous executive director, who was the owner's spouse. We also retained an outside HR firm to review this salary compared to other executive directors with nonprofit organizations. The target salary of the executive director role was set based on the results of the study. The Historical Society did not wrongly terminate its former executive director. The former executive director was properly terminated following an investigation conducted by an outside contracted HR firm after several internal complaints. We will honor the privacy of the parties by not discussing the details due to the confidential nature of HR issues. The Historical Society is not seeking to demolish the building or any building on the grounds. Our mission is to preserve, restore, and educate the public about this historic building. That mission has not changed. There are other groups on social media and in the paranormal community falsely claiming that they are saving Waverly Hills. To our knowledge, they are only fundraising to assist in paying the legal fees of those involved in the lawsuit we filed. These groups are not involved in the incredible work being done by the Historical Society to preserve Waverly Hills. None of the money they are raising has gone into the building. The only organization working to preserve Waverly Hills continues to be our historical society. We have made a lot of progress here at Waverly Hills in the past 2 decades and will continue to work hard to restore and preserve the sanatorium that we all know and love. Nothing has changed for the public, and we invite the community to schedule a tour to see for themselves. Thank you to those who continue to stand behind us. We are Team Waverly, and we are proud of the work we are doing here at the sanatorium.
In their opinion, the people who are claiming to be saving Waverly Hills are only donating money to help Charlie and not donating any money to restoring the actual building itself, which I can kind of understand, because if they were about saving the building itself and not the owner, then yes, there should be some donations going to restoring the building. On the other hand, I'm an outsider, so I really don't know what's going on behind the scenes or even in the community. You can form your own opinions on this entire situation, and I don't really have an opinion on it just yet. I heard both sides, but I haven't seen any hard evidence from them. I'll wait and see how this plays out in court, but at this point in time, I really don't have an opinion on who's at fault, or maybe even both are a little bit at fault. There are two sides to every story, and the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Now that we've gone over a brief history of Waverly Hills and its purpose, I wanted to briefly talk about tuberculosis. The word tuberculosis was used back in 1834 by Johann Schölein. However, it's been estimated that tuberculosis, the actual disease, has been around for as long as 3 million years. It's had different names in ancient Greece, ancient Rome, and even in ancient Hebrew, and I'll leave all of those up on the screen. Tuberculosis was called the White Plague due to how pale patients would become because of it. It was also called consumption, even after the term tuberculosis was used. I'm going to start calling tuberculosis TB from here on out because I'll be talking about it a lot and it is a mouthful. Prior to figuring out that TB was an actual bacteria, it was believed that it was hereditary. In the early 1800s, there was something called vampire panics throughout New England, which is interesting given my last Spooktober video about Bridget Bishop and the Salem witch trials. In that video, I discussed the mass hysteria surrounding witchcraft. However, when a TB outbreak happened, it was believed that after the first person died of TB, they came back as a vampire to infect the rest of the family. The townspeople would dig up the vampire, well, in their minds, and perform a ritual. I'm sure the rise in cases was incredibly scary for most people, that they probably figured anything was worth a shot to try and minimize cases. Although I think digging up the dead thinking they are vampires is pretty intense. On March 24th, 1882, Robert Koch, who won the Nobel Prize for Medicine and Psychology in 1905, announced that TB was actually caused by a bacteria and that TB was an infectious disease as opposed to the previous beliefs of it being hereditary. Until they were able to find antibiotics for TB, they would treat people with staying warm, resting, good food, and being outside, which is why in some old photos you can see people in beds outside. They even tried to boost morale in patients because it was believed that having a positive outlook and being happy helped, which in present day is toxic positivity at its finest. However, I'm going to let it slide in this situation, only because if people were dying, I can see how trying to stay as positive as possible could make your last days a little bit more bearable. People might call me a hypocrite for saying that, given the topics I predominantly cover on this channel, but like I said, I'm letting it slide this time. Back in the Middle Ages, the treatment for what we now know as TB of the lymph nodes and neck was called the royal touch. Some believe that if they would be touched by people like kings and queens, it would cure them of this. Eventually, they would find antibiotics that would help. Before that, though, some treatments for TB were more invasive and dangerous. They would use a specific technique, which I won't even try to pronounce, but I'll put it up on the screen. This technique would collapse the infected lung to help it reset and allow any lesions to heal. This technique had been around for a long time though. In 1696, Giorgio Baglivi reported an improvement in patients with TB after they received sword wounds to the chest. Then, the first successful lung collapsing was in 1834 when the patient was said to be cured. But at the same time, this also didn't end well for others and it would be fatal. It's just terrifying to think about these techniques that were used back in those times. I can't imagine how horrible it would be to have this end badly. whether that be from infection or from the lung collapsing and never recovering. That death must have been so excruciating. Some facts regarding TB that I found during my research is that the first one was during the Nazi occupation of my home country of Poland, 30,000 Polish patients with TB were executed, while an antibiotic was almost ready to treat people. Then, in Canada, they would surgically remove TB in Indigenous patients during the 1950s and 1960s, even though this procedure was no longer being used on non-Indigenous people. In 1944, Albert Schatz, Elizabeth Buggy, and Selman Waxman found that streptomycin was the first effective antibiotic against TB. As the years went on, even more medicines came out as well. There has been speculation that the mortality rate of TB had decreased in England and Wales, and that the antibiotic was a very small portion of that decrease. Just like with certain bacteria and viruses, a new strain would emerge in the 1980s that was drug resistant. Due to the rise in TB cases, the World Health Organization issued a global health emergency in 1993. According to one source, every year, nearly 500,000 new cases of drug-resistant strains of TB are estimated to occur worldwide. Now that I've given some information regarding TB, since Waverly Hills was treating patients for TB, let's talk about something that is a little more eerie, or maybe the better term to use is unsettling and sad: the Body Chute. The Body Chute is what you would expect it to be. This was actually a tunnel, but it was used to transport bodies and supplies in and out of the sanatorium. If you've been here for a bit, you may have seen my video on Greystone. In that video, I talked about how I may have allegedly gone inside. Well, there was a passageway like this in that hospital as well. This passageway, from what I can remember, eventually led to a jail cell and what looked to be an electric chair. I have no idea what this was actually used for, but I think we can all speculate given Greystone's history. Anyway, the tunnel at Waverly Hills was about 500 feet to the bottom of the hill. Because there were no antibiotics discovered yet for TB, there was at least one death per day. The hospital workers and doctors stated that the sight of the dead being carried away for everyone to see would lower morale, and so they decided to hide it and take the bodies through this tunnel, hence the name Body Chute. They stated that the increase in morale helped lower death rates. It's said that there could have been tens of thousands of bodies that would have been transported through this death tunnel. However, because of poor record keeping at Waverly Hills, unfortunately, no one knows for sure. If you're an avid watcher of ghost hunters, the sanatorium was called one of the most haunted hospitals in the eastern United States. Waverly Hills has been featured in the media quite a bit. Some of those media outlets included ABC Fox, VH1, Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, the Travel Channel, and of course other creators who have made videos about it here on YouTube. In my personal opinion, Greystone was probably the creepiest hospital that I have gone to, and being from the Northeast, there were a few places that I went to. Some of which I paid to go to, others I may have allegedly snuck into. Greystone has stuck in my mind for a very long time though. I think it's not because of the legends and ghost stories, but because of what happened there. The living were scarier than the dead. Back to Waverly Hills and some hauntings that people have claimed over the years. Now, take these with a grain of salt because I'm sure some stories may have changed over the years due to it being retold, and we all know what happens in the game of telephone. Visitors have reported that they would hear voices in the empty rooms. There would be odd smells and weird feelings of being touched. One of the popular ghosts at Waverly Hills is a young boy named Timmy. Timmy was about 6 years old when he passed away, and it's unknown if he died of TB or something else. It's been stated that he now haunts the hospital and likes to play pranks on tourists. He loves playing with balls, and visitors claim to have seen balls rolling around on the floor. Of course, there are skeptics who debunk this, saying it was probably just the wind and the uneven flooring of the hospital. According to one source, they stated that the 5th floor has been said to have housed mentally disturbed patients. Apparently, the 5th floor is supposed to be the most haunted area. In room 502, 2 nurses had unalived themselves. One was said to have hung herself after getting pregnant out of wedlock, while the other reportedly jumped out of the window due to stress. These 2 stories were not officially documented, but people have reported seeing apparitions in a nurse uniform. Others have even said that they felt an overwhelming sensation to jump out the window. With the Body Chute transporting so many bodies, people have stated that the area is also haunted by staff and patients. Paranormal investigators have claimed to capture voices and dark figures in the death tunnel. According to one source, Charlie Mattingly, who is currently battling it out in court, I actually spoke about him earlier, was a skeptic when he and his wife Tina first bought Waverly Hills. Charlie said that his mind quickly changed after he had been chasing someone who he thought was trespassing on the property, and come to find out there was absolutely no one there. When talking about the possible number of deaths in one place such as Waverly Hills, Charles said, quote, "So you're talking somewhere around the 18,000 to 20,000 people that actually died here, and when you think about that much death in one place, how could there not be some type of residual spirit of some sort left by somebody? Someone who was here before," end quote. Charlie has stated that when they've shown people the footage or photos that they have as evidence, some people just brush it off and say it's not paranormal footage and try to debunk it. If you've ever visited or have heard of more paranormal sightings, let us know in the comment section below. I love a good ghost story. Due to the lack of proper documentation, we don't really know the exact number of people who died at Waverly Hills. Some have estimated that 60,000 people died, whereas others have stated between 6,000 to 20,000. We probably won't ever know the total number of deaths, but just those numbers that have been speculated by others is a frightening amount. You can take a tour at Waverly Hills, and at the time of filming this, a 2-hour paranormal tour is $25, a 2.5-hour historical tour is $30, a 6-hour public investigation is $90, and a private overnight investigation is $1,000. To anyone who stayed there overnight, I don't know how you did it. I would probably be terrified. At the end of the day, whether or not Waverly Hills Sanatorium is haunted or maybe just a cash grab, the history of this place is unsettling. Thousands of people died. Just think about that for a second. Some people spent their last moments in a hospital where they would possibly be brought through the Body Chute, and they would become another number of someone who succumbed to tuberculosis.